Throughout the years, I have focused on brand storytelling since like 2018. And I've kind of shifted my language around this. Not because I've stopped believing in the power of story, but I realize that there's also quite a bit of confusion around this subject. And it's probably because it just gets used so much in like marketing and business spaces that it's almost, in some ways, it's become meaningless. Like I've always been like, hey, it's like more than a buzzword. It's like key to surviving as a business is being able to tell your story. But I find that that's not quite enough, because your story is one aspect of your marketing messaging and your positioning as a whole. So I've kind of shifted that language into your brand narrative. So the difference in those two things, Mace, like you're like, a narrative is a story, you dumbass. And you're like, maybe, like you're right. Like those are two synonyms. Like I'm not going to pretend with you. But conceptually, I find that they are different. Like telling a story is different than an overarching brand narrative. So your story is like how you came to be, what's your mission, and all of those are important. However, there's typically like, it's just a story. Like, hey, this is like, I have, there's somebody that I know who created a like a telehealth platform because her father passed away while waiting for an appointment, because it was spaced out so long. And this is something that happens quite a bit, where people are waiting to be seen by specialists and they don't end up making it to that point. And she tells the story very beautifully, let me tell you. It's and it definitely hits you in your feels. That is a really important story to tell. Do not get that part twisted. But to me, brand narrative is more than just the story of what happened to you. It is like that overarching like pitch, or that like I've said before, the positioning. Meaning that it's like the perspective that you bring. The perspective that you bring is definitely shaped by that story that she was telling, but it's more than that. It's your education, it's the background, it's like your expertise, it's those lived experiences, it's the identities, it's all of those aspects. And like that narrative also needs somebody from the outside to be looking in at it. Like all of that stuff is internalized. It's our internal perspective. It's our internal positioning, our voice. It's like, again, how we talk about these things, what we talk about. But the brand narrative is, okay, that is all informing, but it needs to be like, what is the thematic part of that? What is the part that is like, to go into like talking about fiction, which I try to draw some comparisons from that a lot. Like what is the overarching plot of that? Like what is the like in journalism uses like the through line, meaning like what is the thing that like all of these things weave their way back into, which is why I think the word narrative is a little bit more descriptive to that than just your brand storytelling. And again, it's like you're, in a book, I said this in an earlier video, in a book, they don't say blah, blah, such and such person woke up this morning, ate such and such for breakfast, had their shower, walked to the bus stop or walked to the subway for work, got on the subway, read their book, went to work. They don't talk about that for a reason, because readers do not really care. Unless there's something about that is going to be relevant to the overarching plot, they're going to leave it out. So like the brand story, when you're worrying about like, what do I leave in and what needs to be kept out, like that narrative piece is like, what, like, does it add to that through line? Does it add to that overarching narrative? And that is the thing that I think, as I have evolved, again, I've been talking about this for going, 7 years now, give or take. And my understanding of this has shifted, because I'm like, yes, story. And I didn't think of any of the other things around it. And then around 2022, I started to realize, it's more than just the story of what happened to you. There's a lot more involved with that. And then like, how do you coalesce that into a value proposition? So if you're not aware of that, like the value proposition is, again, what are the differentiators that set you apart from other people who are doing very similar things? And the story is really important because, again, that story belongs to to Dr. Shelley Cooper alone. No one else has that exact same story as she does, and the education and the stuff to back up, to go along with it. Nobody else has that type of story. So, like that is a very essential part of it, but it is not the only part of that brand narrative and about that unique value proposition. It is, but it also helps to understand this is why it's important to you, and this is why maybe like you do it in a different way than other people. This is especially true with like in health, where there's different modalities that can happen, mental health or physical health, and you're like, hey, I chose these modalities to operate in, if you're a healing professional, because this is how I've noticed it with clients, or this is what drew me to that training, or this is what was actually able to help me as an individual. And so I decided that this is what I needed to learn to do for other people so that they can get the same benefits that I were. So that story does come into it. But again, you're helping make it relevant to the other person of like, here's why these modalities are different. Here is why this type of framework or process that I do is different. Or here are the people who've inspired me along the way. Like a great example of that for my own business is, when you hear brand storytelling, you often think of Donald Miller's story brand, or you'll think of Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. And of course, I take inspiration from those things, but I also found that those weren't like as helpful and actionable as they could be, because it was helping you write copy in a way that mirrors the hero's journey, but it wasn't really helping you with the messaging and the positioning part of like what to say. It was telling you how to say it, but not really what to say. And that was something that was really, really hard for a lot of the people that I worked with early on, and even today, because it is very hard to get out of your own head and figure out what parts of the story are relevant to other people. So you often need that outside perspective to help you in a framework that is externalized, that you can take yourself through, that will help you arrive to that narrative piece, which is what I'm talking about throughout this, So if that's something that you are struggling with, hold on with me. And I'm settling in a little bit here on my couch. So I've talked about all the things that make up the brand narrative. I'm like, yeah, you have to find the through line, the themes, but it's like, okay, well, how do you go about doing that? And I do longer workshops on this, and I will definitely continue to do those, and I'll probably put them on YouTube. But I'm going to try to hit the key points, right? So I think that brain dumping a lot of that out first is really helpful. And I've seen this, I'll give credit to like Austin L. Church of Freelance Cake. He has a really good article on positioning that it's always validating to see people who you've never really heard of before that are doing things very like, or at least doing the process in a way that's similar enough to you that you're like, yep, that's kind of what I already do. I'm glad to know that it's not just me. But so that was one that I can definitely link. But getting through like, okay, yeah, I have like, for me, like I've been a nurse for 12 years. I've done XYZ. I've worked with this, with Cerner Corporation, which is a big deal in Kansas City. And I've done, like learning and development work. And I've done, I've worked in OBGYN, and I've worked with moms and babies and this and that, and I, went to this type of school, going through all of those things. A lot of it's not going to be relevant, but what writers often don't tell you is most of writing and most of like figuring, and this is true with copywriting, nonfiction, fiction, a lot of it does not happen in the beginning. Like the writing in and of itself is not the most important part. The being able to distill it down for copywriting or revising if you're writing fiction, that is where all of the magic happens. That is the key. So like, do not, definitely free write, stream of consciousness, whatever you need to do, brain dump. There's some good exercises that Dr. Michelle Mazur has for free on her website about her 3-word rebellion. So those prompts are also helpful. Things that I use with clients, I have my own little workbook that I go through, and I can probably maybe offer in the video description if you guys want it. But it's like, what moments in your life like really, constructed the worldview that you now have? Like, why did you realize that the status quo in this particular industry is not serving you and other people anymore? At what point were you fed up, or you felt like giving up in your life, in your creative projects, in your business? Like, what point did you want to give up? What inspired you to keep going? Thinking through those emotional beats. So, stories have beats. This is something like, it's not exactly a scene. It's, like I said, it's just more of like an emotional piece of it. If you care more to learn more about that, Blake Snyder's Save the Cat. I actually have it back here, over here somewhere. One day I'll just show you all of my books. I'll just be like, here's some books that I use. But yeah, so thinking through those moments, thinking through moments from your clients, that if you, if you have some of those that have stuck out in your memory, there's some of those things in your work projects or moments or conversations that you've had that have stuck with you for a long time. Write those down. What did those mean to you? Like, what was the person, like, what insight did you or that client have through that? What was that epiphany? What was your own epiphany moments? I have my 7-step client transformation arc, which I will talk about. I don't know when that's going to come out, but that'll be coming out. But at what point were you like in that crisis moment of like, okay, whatever I am doing, like it's kind of the rock bottom in that, like, okay, whatever I'm doing now, I cannot continue. I talked about this a few videos ago in my own little rock bottom moment when I fell unconscious in front of my brother, in front of my son's school, going to an appointment. And it was like, oh, what you're doing, Max, you need to stop. You need to figure out a new way to do it. And you have that moment, right? Because you wouldn't be starting this really scary new, or maybe it's not new, the scary business. Like, this is kind of the harder path that you have chosen, which we all have chosen. There's nothing, there's hard parts about being an employee too. I'm sure. It's kind of why I stopped being an employee, is because it felt too hard for me to conform to other people. But that can be its own video one day. But yeah, like thinking through those moments and really like illustrating them. How did they make you feel? Being very sensory and imagery. That I think is really helpful for getting to the depth of it instead of just the surface. Like I said, because I think that sometimes when we're doing brand storytelling, we're like, this happened, like, then this happened, then this happened, then I realized this, then this happened. It's very expository, and like in a fiction way, it'd be like an info dump, like if you're in like if you're reading like a fantasy or science fiction book and they're like, this is how the technology or magic works, blah, 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 and it's just like being blasted at. That's what you do. It's what you want to avoid. You don't want to do that either in fiction or in your business's story. But you can start to weave that stuff in there through talking about the moments that have happened for yourself, for clients, the rock bottom moment, the concepts of the framework or process that you use, the exercises, the places where you really started to shift your internal beliefs where your clients were able to shift their beliefs. And then from there, like what actions you were able to take, what actions they were able to take, what their identity looks like now that they are on the other side, or you are now on the other side. And really throwing that, you know, and going through that journey. And that, I think, is a good like brand narrative. And like I said, it is an illustration of the pitch. It's like a longer form of it. And once you go through that, again, you have that longer form, that is when you can take that and start to highlight the key words and phrases that keep coming up, or that are really just like, oh, this really like distills and summarizes the whole point of what I'm trying to get across to people. And as you do that, as you start to find those themes, and then even look into other things where people have talked about your work. I talk about this all the time. I was my interview with Lexi, I talked about this as well, of finding the testimonials and the reviews and the things that people have already sent you, and you might start to see that mirrored in how other people experience your work. It's like I said, it's hard to be completely unbiased, so try to find the outside people who are telling you, hey, I chose you because this really spoke to me, or your background about like this really helped me feel like you understood my, you know, what I was going through and my challenges. And like, you'll see that in other people's writing about you, or even ask your colleagues and your business besties and people in your community or in your mastermind of like, hey, what brought you here? Or what, when you think, like, what makes you think of me? Or, you know, what do you associate with me? Or, you know, if I were to, this was going around on the internet for a while, was like this post, you know, on social media of like, if I were to do a TED Talk on something, what do you think it would be about? And like getting people to answer that, you know, again, you can't force people to answer, but that's good insight. That's other people being like, hey, this is something that you do really well. And just, again, getting that outside perspective and making sure that your narrative kind of mirrors what people are not expecting from you, because you don't have to live up to people's expectations. There's no necessity to that, but just getting that other perspective, or the other people's like opinions and like how they perceive you. Because they're often a lot more kinder to you than you are to you, you know, and I'm not immune to that as well. So like having that aspect to it as well, of like getting that input from somebody else is, to me, it's really, you cannot skip that part. I know that it feels like, oh, I've done the workshops and the exercises, I've written what I needed to, I've highlighted, like, and then now I'm ready to go. And it's like, yeah, you can do it that way. And you can, you know, use that to get feedback from other people. But like that, like, again, you can't really do it without feedback. When I got my marketing degree, I did a class on, what was it called? It was campaign planning. It was campaign and event planning for some reason. And a big piece of that was like communications theory. And if like you can develop your marketing message, but there's several key aspects to that. You as the messenger is important, because again, this is something we've kind of talked about, and what we've been dancing around the subject this whole time of like, who is giving that message is important. You know, like, we are right now living in a world where somebody who has no medical degree is now our head of health and human services and whatever. And like, if you were to say broccoli was like good for you, I would be skeptical, because like at this point he doesn't have that credibility to be talking about what's healthy and what's not. Like, not to get super political, but like, he is not an authority in this field. He does not have a doctorate. You know, he like, that credibility needs to be suspected. Do people have, like, you know, if like, Exxon was hiding stuff about global warming, because it's like, there's people with biases, and we have to understand that, like, when we're talking to people, like, everybody has their own frame of reference and lens. And it's not always, and sometimes it's to deceive you, right? We have to kind of have some healthy amount of skepticism, especially with AI generated stuff now. Like, you don't even know if that person that you're seeing really said that anymore. That is, like I said, that's a whole can of worms. But like the person who's doing the message influences how we receive it. And so it's the message, it's the messenger, and it's the recipient. All three come together. And the recipient, again, you may be saying one, has this ever happened to you in like a normal conversation where you've said one thing, maybe to your partner, maybe to your friend, and like they responded to something else, or like they misheard you, or they misinterpreted you, and now they're responding to the thing that they thought they heard, and you're like, no, I didn't say that, I said XYZ. That happens all the time in marketing too, like, or even on social media at all. You post an opinion on social media and they're like, what about XYZ? And you're like, I wasn't talking about XYZ. That wasn't a situation that even I talked about. Like, that happens all the time in the online space. So you can't fully control that part of it, right? But you do need to account for it when you are developing your message. You need to account for how people will receive it. And that's why you do, without a doubt, need some sort of feedback. And I'm not saying to not show up online ever, because people will misinterpret you. You need to show up, and you kind of need to, despite the fact that you may get criticism, like that's just going to potentially come up at times. But it is that feedback, and like it is showing up consistently where you're going to figure out what is resonating, what people are getting, and like get that feedback on that message and refine it with the recipient in mind, and figuring out what words are they pulling out of that. What are they paying attention to, or when are they tuning out? And so that recipient aspect of it is something that you cannot fully neglect. And I think that is a piece of it, is like most people, like even me, like I was doing marketing before I got this degree, and it's not something I had fully considered. I was developing messaging based on people will perfectly understand me every time. And that's just not the reality. It's not a perfect world like that. So that's also why the consistency of the messaging, the consistency of your voice, of like how you come across, and like what type of tone is an important aspect to your brand narrative. And like consistency and just frequency. And I'm not saying you have to show up every single day online or with reels, but people have to have that message repeated, because again, they're not paying full attention all of the time. They need to hear it several times. So that's why having a cohesive brand narrative that takes into account the recipient, that takes into account all of the things about you that no one else shares, that can show that you are somebody who not only has some sort of like expertise to share, but also has experiences that mirror that of that audience, that will help people to be more receptive to that message, and like have that narrative be so much stronger and be more effective. And it is through distilling that into like a 1 to 2 sentence elevator pitch, into eventually like a tagline. Like I mentioned Dr. Michelle Meza earlier. She, talks about the 3-word rebellion, getting it down to like 3 to 5 words, which is hard. It's hard to get it that fully distilled down. And then it's from there of like people, I talk about positioning, because having positioning statements of being like, hey, here are the reasons why to choose me. Or here are the different aspects of my framework that we talk about. Here's the results that people get from that framework. Like talking about like, here is my mission, being able to like really like expand on it, but not to the point where it's like a long info dump of like maybe just like 3 to 5 sentences, and really getting it that far down. So that is kind of what comprises that. And it's from there that forms the basis of like your bios on your social media, your landing pages, how you pitch yourself to like interviews or media, all of those, like this forms the basis to all of the other marketing strategy that you have. It helps you understand like that customer journey, because again, we're mirroring that of the recipient. This is why I start with this. And this is why that is the first pillar in my narrative growth pillars system. So if you want to learn more about that, I can definitely drop that in the video description. So if you at least want to kind of check it out, see the first video and get a little bit more into that, that is something that that I offer, because you cannot neglect this piece. This is a piece that is literally essential to everything else that you do when you show up as a service provider, you know, as a creative, and as somebody who has that story that other people need to hear. So I'll see you back next time.